Empress Zelvara stood in the grand war chamber of the Excelthor Dominion, surrounded by towering holographic projections of star systems, battle reports, and strategic maps that spanned entire sectors of the galaxy. The golden glow of the chamber's artificial lighting reflected off her ceremonial armor, a masterpiece of black obsidian and crimson gold, forged from the remains of 100 conquered worlds. She was a ruler whose name alone struck fear across the cosmos, a leader who had seen countless species kneel before her throne. The Dominion had stood undefeated for centuries, and her will had shaped the destiny of entire civilizations. The idea that a primitive species like humans, newcomers to the interstellar stage, could ever challenge her rule was beyond laughable. It was offensive. Reports of human expansion had reached her ears before, but she had never given them much thought. The humans were an upstart race, barely a few centuries into space travel, while the Dominion had existed for millennia. She had dismissed them as nothing more than another minor species destined for assimilation. Even when Excelthor scouts reported human colonies growing rapidly in the outer reaches of the galaxy, she saw no reason for concern. It was only when an incident occurred on the fringes of Dominion space that her war council demanded her attention. A Excelthor fleet, patrolling near the human expansion zone, had engaged a small human force and vanished. No distress signals, no survivors. Just silence. The fleet had been led by one of her seasoned admirals, a warrior who had crushed a dozen rebellions in the past. And yet, in the face of human resistance, his fleet had been wiped from existence. The chamber buzzed with murmurs of unease, but the Empress remained composed. This was not fear, it was an inconvenience. Her advisors speculated endlessly. Some suggested that the humans had discovered a new weapon, something capable of disrupting Excelthor ships. Others argued that it was an ambush, that perhaps the humans had allied with a hidden faction. A few cautious voices even warned that humanity might be stronger than they had assumed. But the Empress silenced them with a single look. She refused to believe that a species so young could be a true threat. Her empire had crushed civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, races far more advanced than these fragile creatures. If the humans had won a single battle, it was due to luck, nothing more. And luck was never enough to stand against the might of the Dominion. Without hesitation, she ordered a second fleet larger, stronger, and commanded by one of her most ruthless warlords to advance toward human space. This time, they would bring overwhelming force. The Empress wanted no negotiations, no diplomacy, and no delays. The humans would be reminded of their place in the galaxy. Her warlords obeyed without question, sending a force so powerful that no species had ever withstood it. The Empress did not even bother to watch the battle unfold. She already knew the outcome. Her warriors would return victorious, and this so-called human problem would be erased from history. But then, the impossible happened. Days passed, and there was no word from her fleet. Then, sudden bursts of distress signals flooded her communications network, cries of terror, reports of ships being torn apart, transmissions that ended in static before they could fully explain what was happening. The warlords she had entrusted with the invasion were gone. Their ships, her warriors, her fleets annihilated. The war chamber, once a place of absolute confidence, was now filled with a silence so heavy it felt like a void. Her advisors, once proud and arrogant, stood in frozen disbelief. The Dominion had never suffered such a loss. For the first time in centuries, doubt flickered in the eyes of those around her. But Empress Zelvara refused to show weakness. She clenched her jaw, her claws digging into the armrest of her throne. This was not defeat. This was an error, an anomaly that would be corrected. She refused to believe that humans could stand against her empire. The Dominion was the pinnacle of power in the galaxy. No species, no force, no civilization had ever challenged them and survived. And she would ensure that this remained true. Rising from her throne, she issued a new command this time, an all-out war. Every fleet, every warship, every soldier under her rule would be mobilized. Humanity would not just be crushed, they would be erased from the galaxy. She would personally oversee their destruction, and, when their last world burned, She would stand upon its ashes as a reminder that no one defied the Dominion. The warlords obeyed, sending a massive invasion force toward human space, confident that this time the outcome would be different. But as the first Excelsior ships approached the edges of human-controlled space, something unexpected happened. A signal calm, deliberate, and precise was broadcast from the depths of human territory. It was not a distress call. It was not a warning. It was a simple statement: "You should have left us alone." Empress Zelvara's eyes narrowed as she watched the transmission play on the war chamber's central display. The voice carried no fear, no desperation, only certainty. Then, before she could react, her sensors detected something massive appearing on the outer edges of her fleet's position. Thousands of gigantic vessels emerged from the void, their metallic hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. The chamber filled with gasps and murmurs as her warlords whispered among themselves in disbelief. 2,000 supercarriers. Each one was larger than the greatest warship in the Dominion fleet. Each one carried more firepower than an entire Excelsior armada. And all of them bore the insignia of the United Human Nations. The realization struck her like a blade. Humanity had never been weak. They had never been unprepared. They had been waiting. The Empress's fingers tightened into a fist, her rage boiling beneath the surface. She would not allow this. She could not allow this. The Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries, and she refused to accept that this primitive species had risen beyond her control. Her fleets were already engaging, her warlords already giving orders, but deep down, for the first time in her existence, a shadow of uncertainty crept into her mind. What if the Dominion had made a mistake? What if humanity was not just another species to be conquered, but something far worse? As the battle began, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The war that would change everything had begun. And for the first time in her life, the Empress felt something she had never known before. Doubt. The great war fleet of the Excelsior Dominion surged through space like an unstoppable tidal wave, its thousands of warships advancing with perfect coordination. These were the greatest war vessels the Dominion had ever produced: massive dreadnoughts, heavily armored battleships, and swift attack cruisers, each designed for a single purpose: absolute domination. At their center was the command flagship of Warlord Kyle Vuk, a ruthless warrior who had led countless conquests in the name of Empress Zelvara. He stood on the bridge of his massive warship, his eyes locked onto the glowing display of their destination, the human-controlled sector. The fleet had orders to leave no survivors. The humans would not only be defeated, they would be erased. Kyle Vuk had no doubt in his mind that victory was inevitable. After all, who could stand against the might of the Dominion? But as the Excelsior Armada reached the borders of human space, an eerie silence filled the void. No resistance greeted them, no defensive lines, no frantic escape attempts. It was as if the humans had simply vanished. Kyle Vuk felt a flicker of unease, but he pushed it aside. The Empress had declared that humans were weak, and weak species always ran when faced with superior force. He ordered his fleet forward, confident that this battle would be over within hours. Then, without warning, the darkness of space was torn apart by the arrival of something monstrous. From the depths of the void, ships emerged, thousands of them. But these were not ordinary warships. Each one dwarfed even the largest Excelsior dreadnoughts, their metallic hulls glinting under the cold light of distant stars. These were human supercarriers, and there were 2,000 of them. The sight was beyond comprehension. Kyle Vuk felt his blood run cold as his scanners tried to measure their size, their firepower, their energy output, only to be overwhelmed by impossible readings. The warlords and commanders aboard his fleet stared in disbelief. No species in the known galaxy had ever produced warships of this magnitude. The Dominion had fought countless enemies, yet nothing like this had ever been seen before. Before Kyle Vuk could react, the battle began. The supercarriers unleashed devastation on a scale that defied all logic. Massive energy cannons fired beams of destruction that tore through entire formations of Excelsior ships in an instant. Advanced missile barrages rained down, weaving through enemy defenses with terrifying precision. Squadrons of fighter craft, launched from the supercarriers, moved like a swarm of metal predators, overwhelming the Excelthor warships with ruthless efficiency. The Dominion fleet had been prepared for war, but not for this. Panic spread through the Excelthor ranks as their ships began to fall. Entire battalions were wiped out in seconds. Cruisers exploded into fireballs. Battleships were torn apart before they could even fire a single shot, and dreadnoughts, the pride of the Dominion, were reduced to drifting wrecks. Cale Vok's mind struggled to process what was happening. It was impossible. The Dominion had never suffered such devastation, never faced an enemy so vastly superior. Every battle in their history had ended in victory, yet now, their finest fleet was being annihilated as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience. The warlord's officers shouted frantic requests for retreat, desperate pleas for reinforcements, but Cale Vok knew it was already too late. The humans had not only matched the Dominion in strength, they had surpassed them. This battle was not a war, it was an execution. And as he watched another wave of supercarrier fire obliterate what remained of his frontline defenses, he realized the truth that the Empress had refused to see. Humanity had never been weak. They had never been hiding. They had been waiting. And now, the galaxy would learn what it meant to wake a sleeping giant. With his fleet in ruins and no hope of victory, Cale Vok made his final decision. He activated a direct transmission to the Empress's war chamber, sending her a live feed of the destruction. The last thing she would see before his ship was consumed by fire was the vast human fleet, standing unchallenged in the wreckage of the Dominion's greatest armada. His final words echoed through the transmission, "We have made a terrible mistake." And then the screen went dark. Empress Zelvara sat on her throne, her fingers gripping the cold armrests as she stared at the massive war display before her. The Excelthor Dominion had ruled the stars for millennia, its fleets unchallenged, its power absolute. Every species that had dared to resist had been crushed, their civilizations turned to dust. She had expected humanity to be no different a minor nuisance, an upstart race that had simply expanded too far, too fast. And yet, here she was, watching in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded before her. The war fleet she had sent, one of the largest in Dominion history, was gone. Not defeated. Not crippled. Erased. The signal had cut off before she could demand an explanation, but the answer now floated before her in cold, brutal clarity. Scattered debris of what had once been mighty Excelthor warships drifted through space, the remnants of an armada that had been reduced to ruin within hours. But it was not just the loss of ships that unsettled her. It was the ease with which humanity had won. The humans had not fought with desperation or reckless bravery. They had fought with cold, calculated efficiency, like a predator that had been waiting for its prey to make the first move. Her warlords stood around her, silent, their once proud expressions now masked with uncertainty. They had all believed in the absolute superiority of the Dominion, just as she had. Now they were left with questions that none dared to voice. How had the humans built such powerful warships? How had they hidden their true strength for so long? And more importantly, what else were they hiding? Then, a new signal appeared on the war display at direct transmission from the heart of human space. The Empress narrowed her eyes. Humanity had not attempted to negotiate before, had not even responded to the Dominion's initial demands. And yet, now they were reaching out. Why? With a slight movement of her clawed hand, she ordered the transmission to be played. The screen flickered, and a single human appeared, a man dressed in a dark uniform, his expression calm yet unreadable. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no mockery, only a quiet certainty. He introduced himself in flawless Exceltharian. "I am Admiral Ethan Cole of the United Human Nations. I bring a message from humanity." For a moment, there was silence. The warlords around the Empress shifted uncomfortably. The humans had just destroyed one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, and yet this man spoke with neither triumph nor threats. He was not demanding surrender, not gloating over his victory. He simply spoke. "We did not seek this war, but you have forced our hand. And now you must understand the truth. Humanity was far larger than anyone had ever known. The Dominion had believed them to be a young race, expanding recklessly into the stars. But in truth, humanity had already expanded far beyond what the Excelthor had ever imagined. They had spread across the void, building an empire not of conquest, but of endurance. They had watched, observed, waited. The display changed, and what the Empress saw next sent a chill through her bones. It was a map, a vast, detailed projection of the galaxy. At first, it seemed ordinary, until she noticed the markings. Hundreds of red indicators flashed across the sectors near Dominion-controlled space. Each represented a human fleet. Not just the 2,000 supercarriers that had destroyed Kale Vok's forces, but tens of thousands of other vessels, spread across the void, ready for war. Gasps filled the chamber. The warlords stared in disbelief. They had assumed humanity had only a handful of powerful ships, that their technology was an anomaly. But this was something else entirely. Admiral Cole's voice cut through the stunned silence. The Dominion is not the first empire to believe itself invincible, but it will be the first to truly understand how wrong that belief is. Another shift in the display. The map zoomed outward, far outward, beyond Dominion space, beyond the edges of the known galaxy. And there, the impossible was revealed. More human fleets, more worlds, more power. The realization struck the Empress like a blade. Admiral Cole spoke again, his voice as steady as ever. For centuries, we remained hidden. We watched as your dominion expanded, crushing weaker species beneath its rule. We watched as you believed yourselves to be the pinnacle of power. And we chose to remain silent, because we did not seek war. The Empress's grip on her throne tightened. She wanted to believe this was a lie, a bluff designed to instill fear. But the evidence was undeniable. The scale of human expansion, the sheer size of their fleets, it was all real. And now, she understood the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Admiral Cole's eyes locked onto hers through the display. We do not seek your destruction, Empress. But we will not allow you to threaten us. You wanted to see the true power of humanity. Now you have. He leaned forward slightly. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? And then, the transmission ended. Silence filled the war chamber, thick and suffocating. The Empress felt the weight of 1,000 possibilities crashing down upon her. The warlords around her looked at her, waiting for her command. She could order another attack. She could send every remaining fleet, every last soldier. But deep down, she already knew the outcome. This was no longer a war. It was a choice. Would the Dominion continue its path of conquest, knowing that the next battle could mean their extinction? Or would they do something they had never done before? Would they submit? The throne chamber of Empress Zelvara trembled as she rose to her feet, her golden eyes burning with uncontained fury. The walls of the Imperial War Chamber were lined with holographic displays, each one flashing the same horrifying image, the utter annihilation of the Dominion's grandest fleet. Warlord Calvok's last words echoed in her mind. We have made a terrible mistake. A mistake? No. It was an insult. A humiliation that the galaxy would never forget. Her warlords stood in silence, their heads bowed, too afraid to speak. She could sense their fear, their uncertainty. These were the same warriors who had once crushed empires without hesitation, who had burned entire civilizations to the ground at her command. And yet, here they stood powerless before the reality that humanity had revealed. 2,000 supercarriers. A fleet greater than anything the Dominion had ever encountered. And worse, the humans had thousands more lurking in the void. With a furious snarl, she slammed her fist against the armrest of her throne, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The lights flickered. The warlords tensed. She could feel their hesitation, their unspoken thoughts. Was this the end of the Dominion's reign? Had they finally met an enemy they could not conquer? She refused to accept it. Do you cowards dare to stand before me with fear in your hearts? Her voice thundered across the chamber. Have you forgotten who you serve? One of the warlords, an aged commander who had fought in countless wars, finally spoke. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. Your Majesty, we must reconsider our strategy. Humanity is not what we believe them to be. Their strength rivals our own. The Empress's gaze snapped toward him. Rivals? She hissed. They do not rival us. They have deceived us. They have hidden in the shadows like cowards, waiting for their moment to strike. She took a step forward, her imposing form casting a shadow over the chamber. And now, you would have me kneel? You would have me admit defeat? The warlord lowered his head, but she could see the hesitation in his stance. Weakness.it disgusted her. Humanity believes they have won. Her voice was calmer now, but laced with a deadly edge. They think their little display of power will break the Dominion. But I will show them what true power is. She turned to the massive war display in the center of the chamber. They have revealed their fleets. They have shown us their forces. And in doing so, they have made their first mistake. Her claws tapped against the interface, bringing up the vast map of Dominion space. Her golden eyes locked onto a sector deep within human territory, a sector marked with a single red insignia. Terra, the human homeworld. A wicked smile spread across her face. If humanity wishes to teach us fear, then we will remind them what fear truly is. A murmur spread through the warlords. The thought had been unspoken until now. The idea of striking directly at the heart of humanity was madness, but it was also the only move left. Destroying Terra would send a message. A message that no matter how powerful humanity believed itself to be, the Dominion was still their superior. One warlord hesitated before stepping forward. Your Majesty, their defenses will be unlike anything we have faced. The risk is irrelevant. Her voice cut through his words like a blade. Gather every remaining fleet, every dreadnought, every warship. We will burn their homeworld to ash. The chamber was silent. This was not just war. This was vengeance. The Empress turned to her warlords, her eyes gleaming with a dark fire. Either you stand with me, or you die as cowards. One by one, they dropped to their knees. The wrath of the Empress had been unleashed. And soon, the galaxy would tremble before it. The vast war chamber of the Dominion's imperial palace was silent. The air was thick with tension as Empress Zelvara stood before a colossal holographic display, her golden eyes locked onto the image flickering before her. It was a transmission sent directly from the heart of human space. The emblem of the United Human Nations glowed ominously in the center, and standing beneath it was the same man she had seen before Admiral Ethan Cole. His expression was unreadable, his voice steady as he spoke. Empress Zelvara, this is your final warning. The warlord standing beside her stiffened at the audacity of his words. A mere human, daring to threaten the ruler of the most powerful empire in the galaxy? It was unthinkable. And yet, deep within, there was a whisper of uncertainty among them. Humanity had already proven that it was not weak. It had shattered the Dominion's strongest fleet in a matter of hours. It had revealed an armada that rivaled anything the galaxy had ever known. And now it was speaking not with desperation, but with confidence. The Empress's grip on her throne tightened, her claws digging into the polished metal. You dare to speak of warnings, human? Her voice was laced with barely contained fury. Do you believe your fleet makes you untouchable? Do you think your little victory changes anything? Admiral Cole did not flinch. It changes everything. He took a step forward, his gaze cold, unshaken. You are used to ruling through fear, through brute force. You have crushed civilizations, enslaved species, and believed yourself to be invincible. But you made a mistake, Empress. His eyes darkened. You thought humanity would be just another species to conquer. The chamber was still. No one dared to speak. The warlords, once so sure of their superiority, now stood frozen, awaiting their Empress's response. Zelvara let out a low growl. And now you think you can intimidate me with words? She gestured to the screen, her voice rising. You sit behind your technology and believe it makes you superior. But you do not understand what true power is. She leaned forward, her voice a whisper of cold fury. "You will learn." The Admiral's expression remained unchanged. "I was hoping you would say that." Suddenly, the war chamber's lights flickered. The holographic display shifted. The image of the Admiral was replaced with something far more terrifying. A fleet, but not just any fleet. The warlords gasped as the image expanded. Hundreds, no, thousands of human warships hung in the void, their hulls gleaming under distant starlight. Massive supercarriers loomed in the background, each one dwarfing the Dominion's largest dreadnoughts. But it was what lay beyond them that made even the most hardened warriors pale. A structure unlike anything they had ever seen. A station the size of a moon, surrounded by an artificial ring bristling with weapons. Energy signatures so powerful that even from light years away, their sensors trembled at the readings. Admiral Cole's voice returned, colder than before. "This is not our full strength. This is merely a fraction of what awaits you if you continue down this path." He paused, allowing the Empress to absorb the sheer scale of what she was seeing. "You believe your empire is the greatest force in the galaxy. But you are wrong. You have only seen what we wanted you to see. And now, you have one final chance." The Empress's rage burned, but deep within, something else stirred. A whisper of doubt. She clenched her jaw, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "And if I refuse?" Admiral Cole's response was immediate. "Then your empire will cease to exist." The chamber fell into an eerie silence. Even the warlords who had stood proudly by their empress now shifted uncomfortably. They had seen what the humans were capable of. They had witnessed an entire fleet, one of the Dominion's strongest erased in mere hours. And now, the enemy stood before them with a force even greater, giving them a choice that had never before been offered to the Dominion. Zelvara's claws tightened against her throne. Every fiber of her being screamed to retaliate, to strike, to destroy. But, for the first time in her reign, she hesitated. The truth was there, undeniable. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. Humanity had not just survived their assault, they had been waiting for it. They had been prepared. For the first time in centuries, the Empress of the Dominion found herself facing a decision that could not be made with arrogance alone. War or survival? The last warning had been given, and the next move was hers.